especially to students who struggle with writing. Just for caution, I just wanted to tell everyone that this session is recorded. So if you do have any issue with the recording, you could perhaps take it up with me, but the session is recorded. So just to get ahead, given that we sort of like took about 10 minutes out, I would hand over to the team, to Mr. Mhlalo and the Writing Center team, so that he could start the session. Mr. Mhlalo?
Yes. Must I get started?
Yes, you can start. I don't know if you want to introduce your team and then you can start.
Yes. Okay. This is Andile Mhlahlo from the Academic Literacies Writing Programme. Today it is known as it was formerly known as the Writing Center, but today it is Academic Literacies Writing Programme. We assist students with academic writing skills, different forms of challenges they encounter in their journey of academic writing at the university. Okay, let me show the presentation briefly, so that we're on the same page. Let me share my presentation. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I'm able to see it.
Okay, that's lovely. Okay, I'm with my colleagues, which is Mr. Riyad Ismail and Ms. Kwezi Godana. Okay, my colleagues are postgraduate students who experts in academic writing, so that's why I felt like it's necessary to also invite them to contribute in this presentation so that the presentation add value to students. We provide different ways of supporting, we have different ways of supporting students, in our program. Basically, we review students' documents that are submitted online, which means we have a website link that we have, so whereby you can be able now to submit your document, it's a form online, you fill in your details, like your student number, your personal details, the name of your module, and so on. And then you submit your document via this link. You'll note that in this link, you have an option whereby you indicate whether you want your assignment that will be reviewing for you. It must be in terms of the individual consultation, or we'll review it to give you feedback in writing. So these are the options that we have for you. That's why we call it reviewing documents online. In other words, we give you advice in terms of some different ways of how to write, like, can you change this paragraph? Can you change this sentence? Can you reference here? Can you delete this? Did you think about this? Can you refer to this particular source, in terms of helping you to develop this particular challenge, So it's a constructive feedback that we give to you when it comes to reviewing your assignment. Whether it's an essay, it's a thesis chapter, or it's a research proposal, it's a research assignment, any form of academic writing challenge that you encounter. So our door is open for you. Okay. We encourage students to submit their documents within the space of 4 to 5 days, working days, by the way, before the due date. The reason is because once we give you this feedback, you also need to have a space, to work on the comments and the suggestions that we've given to you in preparation for you to submit to your lecturer. So we need that space at least 4 to 5 days so that you also have a space to work on it as well. So by doing that, we are also improving your skills of writing. Okay. So you will notice that it makes a very, very big difference these feedbacks that we give to you on your assignment. We are not necessarily proofreaders. Proofreaders are those people that normally use, when one is writing a thesis, a thesis proposal or thesis chapter, that come at the end of the document, kind of polishing it, focusing on those typographic errors, like the comma, like the question mark that is not there, the spelling, those are typographic errors. So we are more on the academic aspect of it, But if you need the proofreaders, we have a list that we can give it to you, Usually those students who are at the who are writing their thesis, like the master's students, like the PhD students, they are the ones who mostly require the list of proofreaders. We give it to them. So in this case, we do the groundwork, If it was a table, it's like we're building a table with you, We're not polishing. The proofreaders come in the polishing side when the table has all been constructed and put in place. So at the writing center, we're the ones who are at the constructing side of it, will help you to build up, this academic writing skills, Tiny details like how to write a paragraph, how to reference. That's what you'll be seeing today, those basics. So this is the link that is used, when you submit your document to us. So we really encourage you to make use of this link, before you submit your document to the lecturer. It makes a big difference actually to you as a student and to the lecturer, because most of the challenges that you have, we find that they've been fixed now in our program. They get fixed before they even go to the lecturer. Then the lecturer now will be able to focus on the content. You see, if it's a particular assignment is about microeconomics or whatever, so then your lecturer will be able to focus on the content. All those challenges that focus on how to write, those basic issues. So we help you to fix them. Okay, let's move on. Another way of how we support students is we conduct workshops, which is workshops like this one. Remember, before those days of COVID, we had face-to-face workshops. Okay. So in our days, things have changed. We use this one. Lecturers, because lecturers will tell us that, okay, our students in this particular course, my student is experiencing these kind of challenges. If it's plagiarism, it's plagiarism. Then we'll find a way of addressing those plagiarism challenges as a collective. So in other words, we're trying to reach out to a large number of students when we host workshops at one go. Okay. Although we open that space for individual consultations, as I mentioned earlier on, when you submit it there via our website link, you can specify that you would like help now through individual consultation. So in this case, it is a collective. So it's focused on specific needs, as I mentioned, like referencing, literature review, and so on and so on, you see. Even if you feel like this thing sounds petty to you, but it's a challenge that keeps on coming up, to different students. The fact that the challenge keeps on coming up, students are not paraphrasing correctly, for example. You see, you go to student number 1, student number 3, you find that almost the whole class is just copying and pasting the other people's work as it is from the internet or from the sources. So that becomes a collective challenge that needs to be addressed in the form of a workshop. So hence we have workshops like this one. Yes, as I've mentioned, the online consultations, it used to become face-to-face, those days before the COVID. That is the traditional way, by the way, of traditional way of working, that is used by the writing centers throughout the country, the face-to-face, whether it's a group consultation or it's an individual consultation, face-to-face, but that is a method that has been used across the board. So because of the circumstances, we use the online consultations in our days. So it is up to you as a student now to exploit these opportunities. You see, we have different options. No matter how complicated the situation, just give us a shout. We'll find a way of helping you. We'll find a method that will be appropriate to you. So these are the different options that I just mentioned. So in short, we review your documents that you have submitted to us online, and then we give you feedback via your email address. So which means the feedback will come to email, although you will submit to this website link. We have a team of postgraduate students that are trained, to do this job, like my colleagues right now, they are our postgraduate students. They are experts in their field. They know what they are doing. Trust me, you'll see them as they will be doing their presentations today. Okay, so, and then the workshops, and then the consultations. So these are our details. This is myself. This is where you'll find me. These are also my colleagues. This is a website for our department and our program, which is the Writing Center. So that is all for me in terms of introducing our program, so that at least you know who we are, who are these people that are presenting here today. So the name Writing Center is okay, just keep that word in mind if this new word is kind of confusing, We don't want to be in a situation whereby you don't know how to call us. It's fine, just think about the Writing Center. That's a space to go if you feel like you have challenges with academic writing. Remember, it's good to be initiative rather than to wait for the lecturer to come to you and say, go to the Writing Center, go and fix these problems, So try to be initiative, engage in the process of self-learning, self-developing. Okay, so I am going to hand over now the presentation to my colleague, Mr. Riyad Ismail. He is going to focus on academic writing in relation to writing paragraphs and plagiarism. So over to you, Mr. Riyad.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Please let me know when you can see it. Can everyone hear me speaking?
I can hear you. I can see the screen as well.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I firstly would just like to introduce myself. My name is Riyad Ismail. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Business Management, and I'm also a respondent helping at the Academic Writing Center at the moment. For today, I've been tasked to give a presentation focusing on academic writing, specifically on the structure as well as plagiarism. So before we get started, I just want to let you know that you can feel free to interrupt me, to unmute yourself and ask a question if you would like, or you can raise a hand and then Mr. Mashlalo would let me know if someone has a question. So feel free to participate and ask questions if you have any. Okay. So today we're focusing on two parts. We're focusing on academic writing, the structure, and academic writing, plagiarism. So we're firstly going to define what academic writing is, and we're going to look at the common characteristics thereof. Then we are going to go through an example question specifically related to an essay question and how you must structure it in terms of using paragraphs and then also the overall structure. And we're also going to look at long versus short sentences. In terms of plagiarism, we're firstly going to define it and look at the types of plagiarism. Then also what the consequences are if you are found to have plagiarized in your assignments or your treaties or dissertations. And then after that, we're going to walk through steps that you can follow to avoid plagiarism, specifically focusing on certain programs that you can use. And then we're also going to touch a little bit on paraphrasing. Okay. So let's get started. Before we can start focusing on the structure of academic writing, it's very important that we first know what academic writing is. So we've got a reference here from Fang, and Fang defines academic writing as writing that is done for academic purposes. Now, please, when anyone asks you to define something, please do not just write the words the other way around and define it like that. But it also continues that it is entering into a conversation with others. But the way this conversation is carried out differs from how everyday conversations unfold. Now, when I first read this, I thought it doesn't give you a clear picture in just normal plain English of what academic writing is. So I decided to simplify it for you. Academic writing is a formal writing style used in universities. It is what students are expected to produce for classes and where professors and academic researchers use to write scholarly materials. Now, you get two different types of academic writing. You get student academic writing and expert academic writing. Student academic writing is the type of writing you do as a student when you are conducting research, when you're doing your assignments, and in postgraduate level when you're writing your honors, masters, and doctorate dissertations. Expert academic writing is more what postgraduates or more staff members use, like academics, when they are writing specifically to get the work published in an academic journal or book. I must emphasize that there is a very fine line between the two, where you can actually go from student academic writing to expert academic writing. For instance, a lot of students who are doing their postgraduate, specifically masters and doctorate, they would do student academic writing when they are writing up their treatise or dissertation, because that is a form of assessment at a university. But then those students will take the content that they wrote in their treatise or dissertation and change it a little bit to get it published in an academic journal. And then it changes from student academic writing to expert academic writing. Now, there are some common characteristics of academic writing. The specific ones is that it's structured, it's evidenced, critical, and formal. Now, by structured, what we mean is we do not want to see your whole assignment in bullet points. In academic writing, we use paragraphs. It contains an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, and the content is structured according to paragraphs instead of bullet points. And we also write in full sentences. It is also evidenced. What that means is that the opinions and arguments are supported by evidence, specifically referring to references. Yes, when you put facts down on a document or in your assignment, and it's facts that you received from another source, you need to reference that source in text, and that reference must also be in your list of sources at the end of the assignment. That is very important. It's also critical. We are not just describing what is happening, and we're not just using the information exactly as we found it on different sources. We must also critically analyze the information to show that we understand it, and we must see what the actual author meant by what he was saying. And then it is also formal. That means that we do not use any informal words known as slang. An example I noticed yesterday while reviewing an academic assignment is someone used the word varsity. Now, varsity isn't a word. Varsity is considered slang. The actual word is university. And we try and stay away from such slang. It also excludes contradictions. Not contradictions, contractions. That refers to words like I'm, which is I am, and I've, which is I have. We write the words out in full. Okay. Now we're moving to the next section where we're going to be working on an example essay question. Now we're going to use this question throughout the workshop until we get to plagiarism. To show how you structure your assignments. Now, the example question is, discuss the positive role of game farming in South Africa. Your discussion must focus on 3 of the following topics: local economic development, rural development, ecosystems, facilitating conservation and South African heritage. Okay. So there are 3 steps that you need to follow before you even start typing up your essay. Before you start, you need to do these 3 steps. Firstly, you must identify keywords and phrases. So the keywords and phrases we identified is positive role of game farming, local economic development and game farming, rural development and game farming, and South African heritage and game farming. After you've identified these words and phrases, you must start brainstorming. Before you do any research, I'm sure that you already have an opinion or some knowledge relating to some of these keywords or phrases. For instance, I'm just going to give an example, local economic development and game farming. The positive role thereof would probably be that game farming creates employment opportunities, which would have a positive effect on local economic development. Now, that is my opinion even before I started reading any prescribed reading or anything like that. Now you write all of those possible answers and information down because that will help guide you while you need to research more on your topic. After that, for step 3, now you must go and do a little bit of more reading on your topic and especially those possible answers that you identified during your brainstorming session. So you're going to read a bit, you're going to use prescribed reading, you're going to use articles and websites. Now, the main reason we want to identify keywords and phrases and do this reading is it's going to help you structure your assignment in terms of headings. Now, after you've done those 3 steps, you're going to move over to the next one where you need to start structuring your assignment. Now, in academic writing, there's kind of like a generic structure that everyone uses. This is now obviously unless otherwise indicated by a lecturer. You're always going to have a title or cover page. Now, your title and cover page will be followed by a table of contents, then an introduction, and then your body. Now, your body is going to consist of subheadings, which would contain paragraphs describing or relating to those headings. Then you're going to have a conclusion and a list of sources. Now, as I explained, this is the generic structure. Now we're going to quickly focus on those headings that I just mentioned. Now we're going to focus on the title and introduction. Now, the title of your essay is going to either be based on 3 things. It's either going to be the information provided by your lecturer, it can be the assignment question, or it can be the keywords and phrases of this that you have identified. An example thereof is positive role of game farming in South Africa, local economic development, rural development, and ecosystems. I hope that you can see that the title that we chose for the example actually consists of the keywords and phrases that we identified in one of the previous slides. Just make sure that when you choose a title, that it's actually descriptive enough that when you read the title, you know what the assignment or dissertation is actually about. I mean, if you read that title, you already have like a general idea what to expect. Okay, now after you've done your title page, you're going to move on to your introduction. In your introduction, you need to introduce the topic areas with general broad opening sentences. You need to let the reader know what your assignment or your treatise is going to be about. You need to indicate arguments or messages, and it also should include the roadmap or structure of your essay to let the reader know what is going to follow. Okay, so now after reading the introduction, the reader must know, okay, this is a general idea of what your assignment is about, and this is what I can expect to come now in the next few pages. Okay, now we're going to look at an example of the introduction. The aim of this assignment is to discuss the positive role of game farming in South Africa by emphasizing the crucial role game farming plays in job creation, especially in the agricultural sector. Do you see that when you read that, you already have a general idea what the aim of the assignment is, what to expect? Next, it says, the discussion in this document is categorized into three themes, namely local economic development, rural development, and ecosystems. After reading that part, the reader already knows what headings to expect, what content to expect in the next few pages. Now, those themes or the roadmap that you give them can usually just be an indication of the headings that is going to be included. Now, headings are very important because it gives a more structured way to your assignment so that the reader know what the paragraphs underneath that heading actually focuses on. That also makes it easier for the reader to actually find content that they are specifically looking for within your assignment. Okay, now we're moving to the body. I just want to stop here quickly. Does anyone have any questions here? Do we see any hands?
I don't see any questions and hands so far. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on to the body. Now, in the body of your assignment, as I already mentioned, we would like to see headings. And I would like to emphasize the importance that you must use paragraphs and not bullet points. A paragraph is a related group of sentences that develop one main idea. And a paragraph must contain specific elements. It must have a topic sentence that states the main idea or topic sentence that relate to the essay topic. Now that is almost like introducing what your paragraph is about. Okay? Now, after you've introduced what the paragraph is going to be about, you need to have supporting sentences to explain and develop the point you're trying to make. That is specifically now referring to referencing, because you'll see the next point says there must be evidence. Most of the time, your point should be supported by some form of evidence from your readings, which include references. It doesn't help that you have a paragraph which are all facts or your opinions, but you've got nothing to back it up. If it's your opinion, you don't have to reference it. But if it's a fact, you need to put those references behind it. And that's important because you're saying that other authors also agree or disagree with what you are saying. Okay. Now, there are some crucial tips regarding the content of a body in academic writing. You do not just put facts down on a paper. You must actually critically analyze and interpret the information and comment on the implications, significance, and impact thereof. Now, this is important because the moment you are just putting facts down on a paper and you're not critically analyzing and interpreting it is a moment you start moving a lot closer to plagiarizing. Because if you are just copying and pasting what someone else is saying, you are using their words exactly the same, and that is generally what plagiarizing is, and you'll see that when we get to that next section later on. Your body must also include concluding sentences that restates your point. Now this analyzes the evidence and acts as a transition to the next paragraph. You must also use transition words, which is also known as connectors between sentences, such as, now this includes words such as similarly, moreover, however, and stuff like that. And you must also make sure that your paragraphs are well connected to each other and that they logically follow the previous one. Now, an example I always use with this last bullet point is there's a term called the golden thread. Now, the golden thread specifically refers to what we just said. They must logically follow the previous one. And the example I use is, if you start writing something about a specific concept, do not start by giving advantages and disadvantages thereof. The reader doesn't even know what the concept means yet, if that makes sense. You first start by defining and describing what the concept is. After you've introduced the concept and told the reader what it is, now you can move forward and give advantages and disadvantages. And I think if you sit and you're writing and you really think about it, you'll realize that it logically makes sense to first define and describe, and then go into more depth. Okay. Now we're going to look at an example of a paragraph. Game farming plays a significant role in South Africa's economy, including the agricultural sector. Can you see how that is an introduction sentence for the paragraph? Now we know this paragraph is going to relate to the significant role on South Africa's economy. Now we know that. Now you need supportive sentences, which includes references to support your argument. Now, Wheel argues that of key importance is that game farming facilitates the conservation of Africa's rare game species, natural habitats, and ecosystem. It also facilitates the unique heritage of South Africans. It is a core source to repopulate the rest of Africa with rare species that have been exterminated through habitat loss, poaching, and hunting. Jaman concurs, stating that game farming also has the ability to create relatively high-quality jobs, particularly in rural areas. Can you see how those 4 or 5 sentences, those sentences from Wheel and those sentences from Jaman, how those are supporting your initial statement that introduced the paragraph? And can you see how after Jaman, we use a word concurs? Now, that creates flow within your assignment. You're not just putting down facts. It now starts reading like a story. It starts reading like an essay. And it flows better. Now, the final sentence is, therefore, game farming has a positive role to play in the economy of South Africa. That is your conclusion sentence for your paragraph. Can you see how the conclusion sentence, this last one, relates back to the introduction sentence? Game farming plays a significant role in South Africa's economy, including the agriculture sector. Therefore, game farming has a positive role to play in the economy of South Africa. Okay, so you can see the connection between significant role and then ending the paragraph with a positive role. Okay. I haven't heard anyone speaking yet, so I assume there's no questions.
No questions so far. Thank you.
Yeah. And then for the last section of your essay, you're going to have a conclusion. Now, I've noticed that a lot of students tend to rush their conclusion. I don't know if it's because they've spent so much time on the actual assignment that they kind of over it now at the end. But the conclusion is actually very important because it needs to remind the readers of what the essay's main aim was and what was actually found. So the conclusion usually provides a brief summary of the main points of your essay. But make sure that you're not saying it exactly the same that you have said it in the actual body of the assignment, because that's just going to make the reader being bored by the repetition of using the same sentences and phrases. So change it a little bit, but make sure to bring the same information across. It also shows the significance of your essay. What does it solve? What should we take away from the essay? So in other words, you now know what the main aim is, but what is the contribution of the essay? And then it's also very important that you do not write any new information. This is critical. Your conclusion should never contain any new information that has not been mentioned either in the introduction or in the body of your assignment. That does not mean you cannot have 1 or 2 references in your conclusion, but it must be the same type of sentences and the same references that you have already used either in the introduction or in the body. Okay. An example of a conclusion. The aim of this assignment was to provide a discussion on the positive contribution of game farming in South Africa. You see, you're introducing and explaining to the reader again, reminding the reader what the aim was. The discussion focused on game farming in relation to improving the economic activities of people at the community level and the developed interest from the youth in local communities in game farming. That sentence is telling the reader what your assignment actually focused on. The final sentence is, therefore, policy practitioners should create more opportunities for game farming in underprivileged communities since it provides opportunities for job creation. Now, this is what the reader can actually take away from your assignment. What's the benefit of actually reading this assignment? You've written it now, and now, based on the information you've provided, you have found that there needs to be an increased opportunities in game farming in underprivileged communities. Now, if your assignment has multiple focus areas, for instance, like this one where we focused on rural development and economic development, and then also ecosystems, this will only be one of your paragraphs in your conclusion. Your conclusion doesn't just have to be one paragraph. So in other words, the discussion focused on farming in relation to, and then you say economic development. And then you can say what you found about economic development, and then you have a concluding sentence for that paragraph. Then in the next paragraph in your conclusion, you're going to say you also focused on that, on the next one maybe, the rural development. Say what you summarize quickly, what you found about the rural development, and give the contribution thereof of what you have found. Yeah, and then there's also, you need to make sure that you differentiate between long and short sentences. To get my point across, I'm quickly going to read a long sentence to you. The research methodology that was traditionally used in social sciences for several decades was the quantitative methodology, which originated in the natural sciences such as biology, chemistry, physics, geology, and was concerned with investigating things that could be observed and measured in some way. Can you see how, if you had to read that out loud, how tired you would be and you would actually have to catch your breath afterwards? That is because the sentence is too long. And that's not the only issue with long sentences. It also leads to an increased chances of making both spelling and grammatical errors. And it makes it harder for the reader to read the sentence and also understand the point that you are trying to get across. Shorter sentences, which are used in paragraphs, are so much better. I mean, it just makes your reader understand what you're trying to say and you're getting the point you're trying to make across quicker. Let's read the short sentence and see how that improves from the previous one. And it's exactly the same thing. Quantitative methodology is a research methodology that was traditionally utilized in the field of social sciences for many decades. Originally, it comes from the field of natural sciences, for instance, biology, chemistry, physics, and geology. Its focus area has always been on things that are observable and measurable to a certain extent. Can you see how much easier it is to read short sentences and also to actually understand the point that you're trying to get across? Okay, before I go to the next section, which is academic writing, specifically focusing on plagiarism, is there anyone that would like to raise any questions?
Okay, I see nothing on the chat box so far. There's no hand. So let's hope students will engage as time goes on. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so for the next section is plagiarizing. Before we can start focusing on plagiarizing, we must first define it. Now, plagiarism is defined as the use of ideas, content, or structures without appropriately acknowledging the source of where the information was obtained. It is also using someone else's intellectual property and passing it off as one's own. Now, just to give you an example of how I'm not plagiarizing, in the first one, I added the reference of where I got that information. And in the second one, I used exactly the same words from that article, thus putting it in inverted commas to show it was those people's actual words, and I also added the reference at the end. Now, this is very critical. Plagiarizing is not just text. It's not just copying and pasting the text and not referencing it or pretending that it's your own. It also refers to tables that you obtain from other sources, figures, as well as pictures. If you copy a picture over and you paste it in your assignment, if you copy a table or figures, you need to actually reference those content. There are 4 types of plagiarism which are common. There are other ones as well, but the most common ones are direct plagiarism, self-plagiarism, mosaic plagiarism, and accidental plagiarism. Direct plagiarism is, as it says, literally copying and pasting the text, figures, pictures, or tables from another source and pasting it in your assignment and not giving credit to the actual original authors. So that one's easy to understand because it's self-explanatory. Now, self-plagiarism. Self-plagiarism comes in 2 forms. Self-plagiarism can be seen as when you submit previous research as new research, or when you submit a previous assignment as a new assignment. Now, this is very important because in some cases, it will be okay to do that. But then you need to let the person that you're submitting it to actually know that this is an assignment I submitted previously, and I'm submitting it again, and then that person can tell you if it's acceptable or not. Okay, that's very important. That's the same with postgraduate people or even expert academic writers who's submitting articles to our academic journals. They need to ask permission to submit something that has been previously submitted. And that's the same with students. If you have done an assignment for one module and you realize that there's an assignment that's very similar for another module, you cannot just use that assignment for that module again. You need to redo it. And that's also an example when I think of someone who might have failed a module. If you failed a module and you had an assignment, and you come back next year and you do the module again, you have the same assignment. You cannot submit that assignment as is again, unless you get previous permission from the lecturer. Then you also get mosaic plagiarism. That is when you are omitting quotations when they should be used. When you are using the text of what another author has used exactly the same in your assignment, you need to put them in inverted commas or quotation marks, because that shows the researcher that you didn't paraphrase. You used it exactly the same, and you also need to reference it. You need to show them where you got that content from. If you do not do that, you are plagiarizing because you are pretending as if it is your own work. Now, some of you might be surprised about the last one, but it's accidental plagiarism. That is when you're forgetting or using improper citations or references. Yes, sometimes you get busy, you write a sentence and you forget to reference it. Now, you are not deliberately doing it, but it still counts as plagiarism because you are using those sentences and pretending that it is your own. Even though you're not deliberately doing it, even though it is an accident, it still counts as plagiarism. For instance, imagine you're doing an assignment and you forget to reference a few sentences here and there. If that is the basis that a lecturer is going to say you are plagiarizing, you cannot go to that person and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot," because it still counts as plagiarism, and the steps for for being found guilty of plagiarism can still be held against you. So it's very important that you know the types of plagiarism and that you make sure you take the necessary steps to overcome them and make sure that they do not occur. Now at NMU, we have a specific policy that focuses on plagiarism. So the policy is called the Policy for the Promotion of Academic Integrity and Prevention of Plagiarism. There are two different levels of consequences. The first level focuses specifically on first-year students. So it's only first-year students with a first transgression. So this is only when you are accused of plagiarizing for the first time and you are a first-year student. Now, the consequences that may happen is if you are found guilty, you can get a verbal warning, and you can be referred to mandatory referencing and plagiarism training, but there will be no formal penalties imposed against you, except the reduction of marks for poor referencing. Now, you might think, oh, that's not so bad. But I mean, we are doing workshops with you guys now about plagiarizing and referencing. It's way better just to make sure you get it correct the first time so that you don't have to go through all of these issues. You want your academic career, your student life to go as easy as possible, as smooth as possible, so that you can just enjoy it and actually just learn some stuff throughout this process. Now, level 2 is a lot more extensive compared to level 1. You do not want to be in level 2 because there are serious consequences for it. Now, level 2 includes all students. That includes first-year students with second transgressions and then second year and up. Okay. Now, if you are accused of plagiarizing, you can be referred to a disciplinary committee. Now, this is already issues for you because that's not where you want to be. And even worse, if you are found guilty at the disciplinary committee, you could receive a suspension of 6 months if it's your first offense, or a whole year if it's your second offense. Now, I mean, do you really want to waste so much time just because you didn't reference and you plagiarized? I think it's very important that you make sure that you can do this and that you do not actually plagiarize because you don't want to go through all of these issues. Now I'm quickly going to go through 5 steps that you can do to avoid plagiarism. Now, first, step 1, which logically makes sense, is you need to understand the concept of plagiarism, and we have just done that. That was like one of the first slides in plagiarism. We quickly defined it, and now we know that plagiarism is when you use intellectual property of another author and you pretend that it's your own, and you do not give the appropriate credit to those authors in terms of referencing. Step 2, after you now know what plagiarism is, you must make sure that you actually paraphrase correctly and that you use quotes where applicable. Now, after that you understand the concept of plagiarism and you know how to paraphrase and you can know how to quote, you must make sure that you actually reference your sources as well. When it's not your work, when it's facts that you receive from another source, you must give credit to those sources. After you've done that, you must check your work for possible plagiarism. Now, we're going to go into step 4 a little bit deeper now in the next few slides, where I'm going to actually touch on 2 platforms or applications that you can use to do this, to actually check for possible plagiarism. And then, obviously, after you've checked for it, you can practice. Keep trying, attend workshops, ask questions, ask your lecturer for assistance, contact us so that we can help you and guide you throughout this process as well. So one of the applications that you can use to check for plagiarism is Turnitin. Now, some of you might have some experience with Turnitin, and it's actually the application that Nelson Mandela University uses to make sure that you do not plagiarize in your assignments or in your dissertation or treatises. So I'm just going to quickly explain to you what you're seeing on the screen at the moment. So in Turnitin, you are going to submit your assignment, And then it's going to scan through your assignment and look what sentences are similar or exactly the same as sentences used in other sources. Okay, so it's going to take a few minutes. It's probably going to take like half an hour or so just to give you some results, and it takes longer the more you submit it. Okay, now on this page you're seeing that there are different colors. So this green is referring to one source, the brown is another source, the blue is another source, green, and then pink. Okay, so I'm going to quickly focus on this blue one here. So what the blue is saying is that there's another source that used exactly the same words in exactly the same format. So it followed, the sentence was structured exactly the same. So to function effectively, activities within an ecosystem require coordination and open communication. That was said exactly the same in another source. Now, the nice thing about Turnitin is at the end of the report, it gives you an overall originality report. Now, in your overall originality report, you will see a percentage which refers to the similarity index. You want this percentage to be as low as possible because the more it is, the closer it is to plagiarizing, and the more sentences is seen as plagiarized. So if you think about the definition of similarity, it refers to how much how many sentences in your actual assignment is similar to other sentences used in other sources. And then it also breaks down like how many percentage is from internet sources, how many is from publications, and how many from student papers. Now, if you refer back to this blue one here, the number 4, you can also go and see what is number 4. And then you will see that number 4 is a guess survey. And if you click on the guess survey, it will actually show you the sentence within the guess survey that it's referring to, where it's saying that you are very similar to what is already said. The percentages here on the side also shows how much of your content is actually from that specific source. Now, 1% aren't that bad. It's usually when it's above 1% that you should start worrying, and that you should, and it's not, I'm saying worrying, it's not the end of the world. That is the time where you realized, oh, I've got 3% from here. I need to go look where it is indicating this, and I need to work on my paraphrasing. I mean, it's not the end of the world. You take some time, you go back, and you just paraphrase a bit better. Okay. Now, another app that we also use is Grammarly. Now, Grammarly is a bit more extensive than Turnitin, but the benefit thereof is that it's completely free. You can go and download it now, and it integrates seamlessly with your Microsoft Word. What that means is you can have Grammarly running while you're actually typing up your assignment. Now, the reason I'm saying Grammarly is a bit more extensive than Turnitin is that it doesn't only check for plagiarism. It also checks it looks for grammatical errors. It looks for spelling mistakes. It shows you, it recommends or gives suggestions on how you need to shorten sentences because the sentence might be too hard to read or understand. It helps you identify improper formatting, or when you're misusing passive voice, and they would recommend you to rather change it to active voice. And it works perfectly. I mean, I'm using it, and I've used it throughout my master's, and I promise you I'm going to be using it throughout my PhD as well. Now, since this is only focusing on plagiarism, I want to show you exactly what's happening here. So while you are writing in Word, it's going to give you like these lines underneath. And if you click on it, it's going to show you what that specific one is referring to. Okay. And then it will explain what the issue is, and it would also give you a recommendation of how you can fix it. How easy is that? You don't even need a proofreader to help you fix your issues. Grammarly tells you how to fix it. Now, you'll also see that there is numbers up top. So there you have like 217, 228. Now, if you go to one of the numbers, and I'm going to specifically focus on one that's not specifically on this one, but if you go to one that's 370, then it will say this study is a qualitative study which collected. Now that sentence has been used exactly the same in another study, and they call it originality, where Janet calls it similarity, Grammarly calls it originality, and it also shows you the actual source that they are comparing it to in terms of similarity or regionality. And you can click on that and you can go and look where are they using that like that, and then you can make a decision. Do I need to change it or can I leave it like that? Then it also gives you an overall plagiarism score, and for this thing the person got 4%, which isn't bad. It's actually a very good percentage. Now, you've heard me mention a few things. You've heard me mentioning paraphrasing a few times. And some of you might be wondering, what is paraphrasing? Now, the policy for the promotion of academic integrity and prevention of plagiarism, which is NMU's policy, defines it as the restatement of what someone else has said or written, but using one's own words to do that with due recognition of the original source. One thing that you need to take away from that is this is two sections. Restatement of what someone else has said, but you must still actually give due recognition. You must still reference the original source, even though you are paraphrasing. So paraphrasing in general English is writing something in your own words, expressing the original idea. Now that's important. You must make sure that you do not paraphrase so much that what the original author was actually saying is not what you are saying anymore. I've noticed that there are some students that try and paraphrase so much because they are so scared of plagiarizing that when I read the sentence and I read the original sentence from the original author, that it actually means completely the opposite things, where the original author was trying to say it's a positive thing, but the way that the student paraphrased it, it came out as a negative thing. And that is also wrong, because what you are saying is that that author said that it is a negative thing. It's also changing the words from the original passages, and you're also changing the sentence structures. What's important with paraphrasing is you are not just copying and pasting the original text and then right-clicking and saying synonyms and just changing the words according to synonyms. That is still plagiarizing. You cannot just go and make the word synonyms and change it to a different word that means exactly the same. And I think this is really where critically analyzing the content comes in. You need to think of what the message is that the author is actually trying to bring across, what it means, and then put it in your own words and reference them. I've got an example here at the bottom. The original text was, any trip to Italy should include a visit to Tuscany to sample the region's exquisite wines. Now, you can paraphrase it as such. Be sure to make time for a Tuscan wine tasting experience when visiting Italy. And then you reference the original author. Can you see that how the paraphrase statement is bringing across exactly the same point that the original content actually meant? Where the original content said you must go to Tuscany, if you go to Tuscany, you must go and have the wines. The paraphrased one is also saying if you go to Tuscany, you must go and have a wine tasting experience when you go to Italy. And that is exactly how you make sure you do not plagiarize, and how you make sure you don't ever have to face the consequences of plagiarism, because it's unnecessary. You don't want to go through that. And that is the end of my presentation. Before I hand over to the next colleague that's going to be presenting on referencing. I just want to know if you've got any questions specifically on the topics that I've dealt with. Is there any hands? You can unmute your mic and just ask a question. It's always nice when the participants are actually participating and asking questions. And there might be someone else who has exactly the same question as you do. They are just a little bit too shy to ask.
Okay, looks like there are no questions, no comments. Maybe students are still digesting this wonderful, insightful session, you know. Yeah. That's good. I enjoyed it myself, you know. That's lovely. Okay, I guess in the interest of time, let's move on to the next presentation. Okay, before we move on, you know, we have an evaluation form that I would like you guys to help us, you know, just to assess this session, you know. In fact, we'll be rating it. Yeah, so you'll see the instructions there. I have a link that I put there in the chat box. So please just fill in the form. It's not gonna take you long. It's just about 1 minute of your time, you know. Whether you do it now or you can do it towards the end of this presentation, but please fill in that form, you know. So our next presenter will be my colleague, which is Ms. Kwezi Godana. She's gonna be going into details on the issues of referencing in relation to academic writing. Over to you, Kwezi.
Thank you, Mr. Mhlahlo, and good afternoon to everyone in the session. And thank you to Mr. Riyad for the first part of the session. I thoroughly enjoyed it myself. I'm looking at the time, and it doesn't seem like we would have enough time, so it may come across a bit rushed. We only have 17 minutes to complete this part of the presentation, and maybe I'd suggest to Mr. Mhlahlo and the organizers to set another time as well that we can go through the referencing aspect more properly and more in depth. But as of now, let's make use of the time that we do have left. I'll just...
excuse me, can we hear from you, Mr. David? What do we do? Can we go on beyond the 1.5 hour, or what's your comment on this?
I think if it's possible, you can go over time, but if not, we can do it another time. But then I don't think you should worry much about time as such. Yeah.
Oh no, unfortunately, I have another engagement. I have a meeting, which is what I'm pointing out.
Okay. Just do what you can, and then that's it. We'll take it from there. Yes, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I shall do that. Let me just share the presentation. You'll just let me know as soon as you are able to see it.
I can see it. It's good. Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, as I said before, my name is Kwezi Godana. I'm a writing respondent at the Academic Literacies Writing Programme, and this is now my second year as a writing respondent, and I'm quite excited to be presenting to you all and maybe assisting where I can with your referencing, which has proven to be quite a bit of an issue for some students, especially first-year students who are new in the university setting and aren't entirely aware of the different referencing styles that each faculty requires of them. So today we are going through the Harvard referencing style, and I'd really just quickly try to get into it because I think that's quite important for your purposes, especially when you reference in the reference list and referencing in text. And it's going to be quite hands-on. When you don't understand something, please make sure you let me know so that we can, you know, minimize the stress of referencing as much as possible. So before we go in, I would first like to differentiate between what in-text referencing is and what a list of references is. So in-text referencing appears in the body of the academic paper, whereas the reference list is right at the end. It may appear, for instance, in-text referencing, it may appear more than once at a time. So you can have the same reference multiple times throughout your document. However, it will differ depending on how many authors you have, for instance, but we'll get into that as we get into referencing for the books. In the reference list, a reference will only appear once. So you will only have to write that particular reference once, no matter how many times you used it in the body of your academic paper. In the list of references, you also will have your sources put in alphabetical order. So if, for instance, you used books, you used journals, you used government publications, you'll create subheadings that stipulate what reference it is that you're dealing with, and you would make sure that all of those are in alphabetical order. So because books come first in the alphabet, books would be first, and so forth and so on. And right under each of those subheadings, you would then have the list of the sources that you used. And the list of the sources that you use, you would make sure that they are all in alphabetical order, and that's quite important. So you don't want to see, for instance, an author starting with the letter Z appearing right at the top or somewhere in the middle, whereas there's an A, B, or an author starting with C at the bottom of your reference list. So you would make sure that everything is in alphabetical order. So the layout in the presentation, I've gone through it quite briefly. This pertains mostly to the reference list, because in-text referencing, the layout and the format would follow that of the academic paper that you're writing. So if, for instance, your lectures tell you that the font needs to be in 12 and the writing style is Arial and your margins need to look a certain way, then you would make sure that your in-text referencing follow the exact same format or the brief given by your lecturers. Whereas the reference list right at the end of your referencing would have to be in text, which is common readable text. For Harvard, it's suggested that it be Arial and that it be in the size 12. And that the line spacing be 1.5 and it be justified, and that the subheadings have the same font and format as that of the actual writing itself. It would only be the heading, which is reference list, that differs, which would normally be 2 points size up. So instead of size 12, it would be size 14, for instance. You also need to make sure for your subheadings that they do stand out, and that people are able to see that we are dealing with a different section of work. So you, for instance, people must, when you look at it at first glance, must see that, okay, here are the books that were used, and here were the journal articles that were used. So you can bold it, but it will also sometimes be mentioned in the brief that your lecturers do give you. So general referencing guide. So referencing guide, this is a general guide that you just need to keep in mind at all times when you do any form of referencing using the Harvard style. Firstly, in the end text, is that you always start with your author's last name and you do not include initials. You would then also make sure that you add a year and the page numbers. So it could either be one page which you are referencing, being, let's say, page 92, or if you are referencing from page 92 to 100, you would stipulate it as such, and you would put page 92 to 100, but you will see it as we deal with it below. You also need to take note of the fact that where there are 2 or 3 authors in in-text citations, you cite all authors every time the citation occurs. So where there are 2 or 3 authors, you cite all authors every time the citation occurs. But however, where there are 3 or more authors, so you would then use et al. So for instance, where there are 3 authors or more, let's say there's Mhlahlo, Ismail, and Godana. Those are your 3 authors. Where they appear in in-text referencing, you would then cite them the first time, all 3 of them the first time, and then the subsequent subsequent citation would include the first author being Umhlahlo, and then you would use et al, and then carry on putting your year and your page number. Where there are authors who are published in the same year. So because in-text referencing is quite brief, it is possible to come across a situation where, it is possible to come across a situation where, for instance, there are two Smiths wrote completely different books, published in completely different areas. However, but they published in the same year. Then it becomes a little difficult because you aren't able to differentiate immediately which Smith is which. So you then would, after mentioning the year of one of them, would put a lowercase letter so that you're able to differentiate. And every time you mention that particular author, you'd use the lowercase level. So let's say you are dealing with two Smiths who published in 2017, for instance. You would write Smith, you'd write the year, and then for one of them, which is the one you differentiate, one would be Smith 2017 and then the pages, and then one would be Smith 2017, small letter A, and then the pages. And for that particular Smith, you would continue to reference them in that way, so that within the text, you're able to differentiate which Smith you are referring to. Reference list. In the reference list, the general guide that you need to keep in mind is that you first need to make sure that you always identify the source. So for all academic writing, every time you come across a source, identify and be conscious of the type of source you're dealing with. And this is quite important because each source is referenced differently in the reference list. So let me repeat that. For each source, it's referenced differently in the reference list. How you reference a book is different from how you reference a journal article, from how you reference a government publication, from how you reference an ebook. So you need to make sure that at all times you write out the full citation. And I always make this as an example. Every time you use a source and you reference it in text, make sure that you simultaneously have a reference list where you write it out in full so that you don't have to worry about first trying to figure out all the different elements of the source, being the year, the date, the publications, and going back through a whole list of references or sources that you have or that you intended to use or may not have used. So while you reference as you're writing in text, make sure that you have a follow-up reference done simultaneously in your reference list so that you are able to keep track of your references firstly, because it is important to mention all the references and that you don't miss any of them. But also it works well and it's an efficient system so that you don't have to go back each time and look through your whole document and see, have I mentioned a Smith? Have I mentioned a particular John, for instance? So those are things that you just need to keep in mind. Also, the second part is that you need to determine the format that needs to be followed in the referencing. So, for instance, the author, who is responsible for the work, the date, when was it published, the title, what is it called, and the source, where can this work be found? So the source be the place where it was published and the publisher as well. Or if, for instance, there's a URL link, those are the things that you need to keep in mind. Also, be mindful of your punctuation, and these are the common errors that occur quite frequently with students and in their referencing. It's that they don't they aren't too particular, or at least little mistakes are found in the punctuation. So for instance, when you are separating initials, it's done with a full stop. However, when you're separating someone's surname from the initial, it's done with a comma. So just be conscious as we go throughout and keep in mind of all the different punctuations that need to be placed at certain spaces. You'll find that, for instance, sometimes when putting a year, putting a page number, it's right next to the colon and there's no space in between. Those are the important things that you need to make sure that you pay particular attention to, and that you don't make referencing mistakes according to Harvard. So let me move on to the next one. These are the different types of citations and sources and references that a person can use. There's quite a lot that you can go through. However, for our purposes, we'll only be dealing with the books and the ebooks, as well as journal articles, newspaper articles, theses, reviews, government publications, websites, and we have a question on social media, where the social media can actually be referenced. But as we go along, we'll see. So books, this is what I call a reference list elements. And this is how you would find it. I also normally call it a formula that you need to find and keep in mind. And the way it's written is written in exactly how it needs to appear in the reference. So for instance, as you can see, where it says title and subtitle, only those two are put in italics, whereas the rest in the formula are not. And that gives you a good indication as to what needs to be italicized in your reference or in the reference list. So as I mentioned before, in text reference, you place the author's name, as you can see, the last name, no initials, and if there's two authors, you would write Theaka and John, and being the word and, but you will see it just as we go when we deal with two authors. And then you'd put in brackets the year, so it's 2012, that's the year of publication. You put a colon, and then you put the pages in which you're referencing. So these are the pages being referenced here, pages 49 to 54, and you write it exactly like that. As you can see, there's no space in between 2012, there's no space in between the colon, and there's no space in between the page numbers. That's exactly how it needs to appear. As for in the reference list, this is how it would appear. So you would make sure that you include the initial of the author. And so this book only has one author, being Theaka. So Theaka, and then you separate the surname and the initial with a comma. So there is the comma, separate the surname and the initial with the comma. And for each element of this is what I failed to mention in the beginning. So these are elements, as if you look right under the what I call the formula, the reference list elements, what you see, it says authors, it says year, it says title, subtitle, place, publisher. So as a rule of thumb, all elements are separated by a full stop. So for the first part, it's authors separated by a full stop. So that's element 1. Element 2 being year, separated by a full stop. Element 3 being the title and the subtitle. So title and subtitle are one element, separated by a full stop. And then place and publisher are also another element, and they're separated by a full stop. So at all times, please make sure that you keep in mind that authors, years, titles, and the place of publication being the source all need to be separated by a full stop, just as a rule of thumb, and and with that alone, you've got at least one down before getting into the next. Also remember that at the end of a referencing of a book in the reference list, you always end it off with a full stop. So at all times, you'll end it off with a full stop unless the reference ends with a URL of which a full stop is not used. So at all times, you end it with a full stop unless it's a URL which has been included and it ends in a URL, then you don't end it with a full stop. So here is an example of a book with two authors. So we have the in-text reference. So there are two ways to reference a book in text that has two authors. The first, as you can see by the highlighted parts, is that when you're mentioning it within, when you aren't mentioning it right at the end of the body of work, and you're mentioning it within the body of work, for instance, you write Desha and you write and in full. So you write it as is, and then you write Hangrown. So those are two authors, no initials. And then in brackets, you'd add the year and you'd add the page in which it appears and carry on with your sentence. So it says Desha and Hangroves, 2014, page 67, states that, and then it carries on. However, when you're ending off in text, with a reference. And so you've written the accessibility of information, and that's the ending off line, and you want to reference that, then you would put it in brackets. However, the and here is the ampersand, and it's the and sign, and it is not the and in words. So as you can see, they're highlighted. When you place it at the end and the authors are in brackets, you only add the and as the sign, not in words. And then you would separate it with a comma. So you would separate the authors with a comma from the year. So it's Desha, the ampersand, Hangroves, comma, 2014, colon 101. Then you close the bracket and you end it off with a full stop as you would end any sentence. So I hope that's quite clear. And then in the reference list, how would it appear? So reference list, as I've mentioned before, always use initials of the authors. The only difference here is that when you mention it when there are two authors, 2 or 3 authors, before the last author, you put an ampersand to separate the authors. So for instance, there are 2 authors here. So it's Desha and Hangroves. So you put an ampersand right there, which is an and sign. So Desha, comma, C being the initial, that's 1 author. And then you put the ampersand, and then you put Hangroves, comma, K, and we close off this first element. So the first element of authors has been completed. The second element being the year, 2014, close off with a full stop. Second element has been completed. And then we have higher education and sustainable development, a model curriculum. Now, higher education and sustainable development, I don't know if someone wants to point something out here. Maybe we can hear from someone as we close off this part. What should have been done there? What is missing? And keep in mind what we had just spoken about the elements. So let me take you to the last page. If you look at the reference list elements, it says authors, year, title, subtitle, place, and publisher. Now let's go back. Something is missing in this reference, and can anyone maybe point it out for us? Okay, while you wait on that, I see a question from Komani CE asking if the book only has editors, do you use the editors as authors for in-text referencing? That is correct. We will deal with editors just shortly. Hopefully we are able to set another time because I am looking at the time, but that is correct. In text, you would use the authors as, you would use the editors in the same way as you would use the authors, and then you would place the year, the colon, and then the pages in which you found, in which you are referencing. So I hope that answers your question. Let me carry on from here. So what you may have noticed or may not have noticed is that the title and the subtitle should have been in italics. And these are the small mistakes that we make and we don't take note of. And so as we go, we will keep on bringing these things up, and you need to be able to identify what should have been done and what should not have been done. So as you can see there, it's a higher education, sustainable development, a model curriculum. That should have been in italics, because as you can see from the elements, as we go back to the last page, the formula, as I had stated before, perfectly places for you, puts it for you as to how it should be put in your reference list. So the title, subtitle part should have been in italics. Mr. Mhlahlo, I don't know if you're still here.
Yes, I'm still here.
Yes, I'm looking at time and I don't want to go too far ahead.
Okay. Yes, it's 25 to 1 now.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it possible if I can complete it here and we set another time for us to sit down with this particular task and complete it, please?
No problem. Yes, I can just talk to the organizers of this, of this workshop, so that we can rearrange, Yes, yeah.
Yeah. But just to close off, what you just need to note in terms of referencing of the book, in terms of 1 author and 2 authors, is that the author's surname and initial are separated by a comma, initials are separated by a period being a full stop, that the commas separate authors. For instance, where here in this example, because there's only 2, we don't need to separate authors with a comma, we only just need to put the ampersand sign, and the year is placed there, no brackets around it, just the year, you put the period, then you put the title and the subtitle in italics, and then your reference always ends with a period. So that for now is what we're going to deal with. I think you guys have dealt with quite a lot of information today, and it's a bit of information overload. So maybe it's a little good that we took a break and you're able to reflect back on everything that has been done and has been said so far, and then we'll be able to pick it up, because it is quite important for your purposes that we get through all the different types of references, and you're able to ask all the questions that you want to ask. Mr. Mhlahlo?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Yes. Oh, were you saying something, Mr. David? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, that was wonderful. I'm sure students have learned a lot from this presentation. Unfortunately, we did not arrange our time appropriately in terms of distributing the presentations. Yeah, generally the referencing is quite intense and very detailed. So I assume it would be much appropriate to have a special session for it, you know, as much as that one that was forwarded, that was presented earlier on was also necessary. So I think we need to arrange much better next time, you know. So yeah, any comments from you, Mr. Dave? Is not here. Yes, please.
Okay. I think I'll just give my final thanks, I think, to Mr. Mhlahlo and your team. I think the students really appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and I think I also support the idea that the referencing seems to be of great interest to students. So I think it would be very beneficial if we perhaps arrange another time, time for it. Yes.
That's lovely. So in that case, thank you to everybody for making yourself available for this session. I know you guys have a lot of things that you are busy with, different courses, this and that, the personal lives, but we appreciate the fact that you take your time and attend to this presentation. I hope to see your participation more when we do it again, you know. Yes, that would be nice. Yes, so thanks to you, Mr. David, for facilitating this process. Yeah, so on my side, bye-bye. See you next time.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and definitely we'll see you guys next time, and we'll work through all of this. Bye, everyone.